Holy shit, I was cleaning my glasses. Welcome to Behind Enemy Lines, everybody. Gary and Mike again. And we have actually an exciting show. You know, a lot of the noise of January 6th kind of slowed down a little bit, but I mean, it affected our country forever. And I think it affected so many different people's lives. So we want to make sure that we never, ever forget what those scumbags did to our people, right? And how they tried to, I guess you want to call it a constitutional crisis. That's what they like to say. And I think that's what it was with their bullshit and their lies and
yeah, well, I mean,
no
yeah, in reality, yeah, it was the left trying to put the nail in the coffin so the right wouldn't stand up ever again. They don't want us having rallies or protests or anything else. That's their domain. They sent a very clear message after January 6th that the government can be weaponized against patriots.
Yeah, so tonight we have a special guest. All our guests are special, right? But Sean's extra special since I was introduced to Sean by a good friend of mine, Chad. And Sean and I talked over the years briefly. We haven't met yet, but he was a J6 victim, I guess you call us a victim. It's not really a victim. I mean, I was lucky, but I was proud. I was proud that I was there, Sean. And I'm sure you were. And we were a part of history, and we're going to be on the good side and the right side of history eventually. So Sean is a investigative reporter. I guess I'm not going to kill your bio.
Yeah. Well, my bio's a little complicated, Terry. So
Sean has a much better memory than me, so that's going to be awesome to have this show. We're going to show clips. Some clips you guys never ever seen before. So go ahead, Sean, to brag about yourself.
Yeah, I guess the short version of it is that I started my media company in 2019. Was actually more interested in doing stuff abroad and human interest stories. Came back home. The riots kicked off. I had correspondence kind of embedded within BLM and Antifa. We were doing reporting on that, live stream reporting with various people. When the election happened after that, I decided that I was going to go follow what was going on after that. Ended up embedded with Proud Boys, was out in D.C. all three times for all three protests, was down in Atlanta, Georgia, was out in Phoenix, Arizona, all the way into the Capitol. We all kind of have an idea what went on there, although it's a little bit of a Rorschach test, so people choose their own adventure.
Yeah.
I got the full experience. Charged with 4 misdemeanors, went through that process, ended up pleading guilty to picketing and parading through a Capitol building, or as I like to call it, illegal walking around with a camera.
Right.
They wrecked my life. Yeah. Whatever.
Sean, did you tell the people about, where you went or how long you were in there when you said, just.
Oh, I was in there for quite a while. I was over on the west side. I was kind of on the West Side Terrace, right when the initial breach happened at 2:12 p.m. There was some doors that were opened from the inside by a couple of guys who are presumed to be in Israel right now. And I went in there. The DOJ kept that out of all my charging documents, of course. So I've got a story all about that. I finally identified them, some 4 years later.
Wow. Yeah.
And just been staying on it. But I was in the building all over the place, saw all sorts of things. I was there, during the infamous altercation between Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn and the Oath Keepers, where he said that, people were using racial slurs against him. That never happened. No video of that has ever surfaced. I was right down the hallway when Ashley Babbitt got shot. I was in the rotunda when police came in there and started crushing people. Was pretty sure at that point that I was going to die. That was pretty wild. And then of course, that relented and they ushered everybody out. That's a real short version of that. But I was in the building for a long time, saw a lot of things. I was there at the West Side Staircase when Derek Vargo. There's some debate. It looked like an officer did give him a little nudge. Of course, he was kind of climbing up a wall, so he fell, hit the ground right next to me. I saw that. I saw a lot that day. It was intense.
And Sean, did you end up going into jail at all? Did they lock you up or what happened?
Yeah, I mean, there was the initial thing. Thankfully, the FBI. I always got to give these guys a shout out. The guys at the local field office in Farmington, New Mexico. Mm-hmm. I kind of had some small town notoriety there at the time because of satire I had written, and people were following my work. So it was kind of well established locally that I was a journalist, not nationally.
Yeah.
So they kind of understood some of the nuance involved in my case. They were actually really, really nice. And what the FBI agent told me, and I have video of it that I posted, is that he just said it was a giant waste of time and money. He said that the DOJ called him, wanted him to break down my door and terrorize my family, and he refused to do it. And he knew that if he resigned, they would just find somebody else that would follow those orders. So he said he wasn't going to do that to me. And he came to my house. They knocked. We had a talk, and then it's kind of an interesting story, and we can get into the weeds. I won't right now, but I was essentially charged on April Fool's Day of 2021. I was up in Denver at the time. I got a phone call, came back down to Farmington, turned myself into the field office. They took me to a federal immigration facility because that was the only facility that was taking people because of COVID in New Mexico. So I spent, a day there, went and saw a judge. They shackled me up, for the video conference, made me look real mean.
Of course,
and
of course.
And he released me on my own recognizance. And I guess my biggest problem through the whole thing was I just never, I refused to shut up. I just kept talking about it, saying the things that even the right didn't want to hear, just trying to be factual and run it down the middle. But even that wasn't good enough for him. And it was a long, protracted process to get to a plea hearing and sentencing. And then I ended up doing 7 days in jail, which
Really?
there's an article. Yeah, there's an article on the Gateway Pundit that I wrote, right after it happened, called 7 Days Isn't Enough.
So Sean, what, so I know, like federal time, but I mean, where do they send you? 7
I was at Greenwood County, right outside of Springfield, Missouri. It was great. The food was good. The company was pretty cool. It's like a bunch of old biker dudes. It was like a vacation, if I'm being really honest. The phone wasn't ringing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't too bad.
Man, listen, I didn't go. I left. You saw some of my videos. I left at I was on the way out at 1:30, and so we graduated. But we were there we were right behind, and Mike's got some of the videos right behind. What's his name? Ray Apps and all that shit. I was with my buddy Rob Waller.
Yeah, we're gonna play video roulette in a little bit because these didn't come across with names on them.
Yeah, sorry. So I left. Me and Rob left beforehand. So we didn't even know until we got back to the hotel that people got into the Capitol. I put on Fox News, but I was a paid federal informant. I got $1 million for that.
That's good.
$1 billion.
Yeah.
Do you have a yacht out on the lake that you got with that money?
And were you paid through USAID?
And that's right. You saw that, right? And the FBI was really pissed off because they're like, when I got home, you're like, you stupid asshole, you left before everyone got in the Capitol. The fuck is wrong with you? So I'm just making fun of these scumbags that are trying to say that I was a paid fed there.
Well, I think that's something we've seen in the entire January 6th atmosphere, is that you have multiple people. They're all pointing at each other saying, you're the Fed, you're the Fed, you're the Fed. And it's, honestly, that's kind of a feature. Yeah, it's the Spider-Man meme, and that's a feature of it. We live in a disinformation space.
It's usually just like how the Democrats like to project. It's usually the guy that's saying that has something to do with the feds than the other way around, typically.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it all. There's people that that I have good reason to suspect were compromised or were working as assets ahead of time. I won't get into names here.
Yeah.
Because I've never been that guy. I don't just go running around making accusations. It proves no point. What I've always told people is like, okay, well, you say this guy's a Fed, or even, we're going to talk about Antifa a little bit, but even with that, as I've always said to people, I say, okay, well, you think this person's a Fed, or you think this person's Antifa, or whatever you think they are, but what did they do? Let's be specific. What did they do?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it goes nowhere. It's funny where, we talk about Ray Epps and back in 2024, early last year, we did kind of a long form analysis with my buddy Kyle Seraphin, the FBI whistleblower. And we were asking that question about whether or not he's a Fed, because I think the term is overused. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize about Ray Epps is that, honestly, what he was saying wasn't that special. Now, you can look at some of his behaviors, his actions, some of the anomalous movements that he had through the crowd, and you can start to speculate from there, and I understand why people do. But what he was saying was not that uncommon. I mean, there was a lot of those sentiments being expressed, and I don't believe that everybody who was expressing those sorts of sentiments was a Fed. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
No, one of the reverse conspiracy theory I've always wondered, like, if I were one of these federal agents and I wanted to create more infighting among the right, I would just pick somebody out of the crowd, give them a very lenient sentence compared to everyone else, or basically nothing, give them a slap on the wrist, $500 fine, and that'll make everybody else assume that person was the Fed or somehow they were involved, and just create more infighting. But I don't know if they're that strategic or not.
Well, I think to a certain degree it can be that strategic. There's another article at 1776returns.com that I would encourage people to read. I think it addresses a lot of uncomfortable truths.
Tell everybody what that is so they know.
Oh, yeah, 1776 Returns. That's where I sometimes write stories. I would not say I'm a prolific writer, but every once in a while I do a doozy over there.
So go to his website.
Yeah. And one of those, I looked into kind of the history of intelligence operations going all the way back to the founding of CIA, and how that relates to Eastern Ukraine. Various instances where the KGB was involved in essentially setting us up by having neo-Nazis that we would think were on our side. We're funding them, but they're acting as double agents. And, it relates to the ideological subversion program that the Soviet Union started. And I have no reason to think that it hasn't continued to this day. I think that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that what you saw on January 6th was just this kind of externalization of that decades-long process. So it's complicated.
I'm typing on Facebook, right? If anybody has any questions for us, any of us, please just type it on Facebook and we'll be able to, address them. I got a question for you, John. Yeah. Before we went down there, I went there with my friend Rob Waller. We got a picture. He's a Cook County sheriff. We went down there for the insurrection, and Rob was so stupid. He's like, don't like me. He wore his Cook County sheriff hat. I'm being sarcastic again. These fuckers are going to spin it, right? And so he just retired as a Cook County sheriff. But we were in the same hotel in that Marriott where there's tons of Proud Boys that happened to be there, 3%ers that were there, patriots, people from all over the country were there. And then we were told in the morning, like, got to look out because there might be like infiltrators that would wear their cheap ass MAGA hats backwards.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I mean that was a rumor that was circulating, and in fact, there was a Secret Service intelligence report that was put out by Site Intelligence. They were using some private intelligence at the time, and it also said those things. So, I mean, that was circulating ahead of January 6th for sure. Mm-hmm. Was that there would be some sort of infiltration by Antifa. It was interesting where Joe Biggs actually came on my show. I believe it was on January 3rd. Of that year, and there was a lot of rumors about what was going to go on there, and of course at the time it was saying, well, Proud Boys aren't going to be wearing their colors, so that was kind of confusing to people, I think, as well. So there was a lot of chaos going on right there, and I think it was once said chaos is a ladder, so some people use that to their advantage.
Yeah, I had on my phone that Zelle, I think it was. What was it called? That little, like, turns your phone into a radio.
Well, it's not Zelle. Zelle's a payment app.
No, that's something very similar. No, very, very similar. And I had it on my phone, and it was like, we're like testing 1, 2, 3, J5, January 5th testing. I swear to God, I thought just for being there, I was going to get arrested. I was shitting bricks until January 20th this year.
Well, you're not the only
one. Well, it's wild. Well, you talk about that, and it's funny where, I never once thought that I wouldn't get arrested. Like, it was weird because when they let us go after, they almost killed us in the rotunda, I was just happy to be alive. I called my mom, made sure my boys knew I was okay, et cetera, et cetera. And then I did my show that evening, and I told the guys that I did my show with, I just said, they're going to come after us at some point. I said, there's no way they're just going to let this go. So, yeah, I mean, it's like I had already kind of resigned myself to that fate. So when the FBI showed up to my door a week later, I was like, oh, there you guys are.
Yeah. And please, let me say this, then you comment as well, right? So people see the way many, many men were dressed that day, right? And so they use that as a justification for a cause for wanting to start an insurrection, right? It's bullshit. Yeah. So for those of you who are not familiar, back in November and December, Antifa was everywhere in BLM, everywhere, right? Couple guys, four people, I think, got stabbed in December. So they throw soup cans, they freeze water bottles, they use bear spray, right? So I went down there with my friend Rob for two things. We went there to see Trump, and we went there to protect people from being beat up or attacked, just like what happened in November and December. And if you remember, there's Rob, there's my cop buddy. Oh, they were trying to guess him as sedition hunters. No, they could, because he's never done anything wrong in his life. He's got his Cook County Sheriff hat on. See that on top left there? And you know what's funny is that late January, we didn't know this until the spring, because he was a retired sheriff and he was a SWAT team guy, and he went to a party with retired cops and sitting cops, and his boss's boss came up to him and said, hey, like there were pictures of us. The FBI came to Cook County Sheriff's Office and showed pictures, and the boss said, oh yeah, that's Rob Waller, he's a great guy, he's retired now. And you know what, as soon as the FBI knew and heard he was retired, they didn't give a shit and they walked away. I bet you my right arm, guys, if he was still on the payroll, they would have arrested for something. And so, like, as this whole thing progressed, I'm sitting there worried we're going to get arrested. But after we heard that in the spring, I'm sitting there thinking, well, Jesus, if they were going to arrest us, they would have done it in early January or mid-January when they knew about me and Rob. You know what I mean? But yeah, because they knew who we were, and then they talked to the sheriff, and here it is. It was in the spring, and I'm like, well, they haven't been here yet, so maybe they're not going to arrest us, you know?
Yeah, Rob's lucky, because I bet if he hadn't been retired, they would have gone through his file, they would have looked for any derogatory information, they would have arrested him, hauled him out in handcuffs to try to make an example out of him, to scare anybody else that was there, or any other law enforcement, retired or current, retired or otherwise, and use that as a way to scare him. They would have pulled up, ridiculous complaints, highlighted those, and just done whatever they could to wreck his life, and then they would have made the chief of police come out and kiss their ass and issue an apology statement.
Yeah, no, like Rob had a lot of his cop buddies. They're a very tight community, right? They didn't even want to talk to him. They were scared to talk to him. Some of them I was friends with because of him, and they stopped talking to me. I even had friends that were leftist scumbags, calling me a traitor and shit. I'm like, fuck you, man, traitor my ass.
Yeah, I mean, it was a wild time. The manner in which people were chosen for charges, I think it lent itself just because of the sheer numbers. I think the number is somewhere around 600 or 700 people who went into the building were never charged. Wow. And a lot of that, you could come up with some conspiratorial reason for that, and I have to kind of apply that a little bit, even with some of the people that I've looked at, like our friends that went to Israel that were never charged, and I say, well, they just never got to it. Because I think this is part of the problem, is that people always assume the government is much more competent than it actually is. Mm-hmm. And they were processing these cases at a relatively breakneck speed for the FBI. We're talking about government employees. Like, they don't like to move fast. They don't like to work fast. Right. I'm sure there were some of them that were ideologically motivated to go after every single horrible insurrectionist there, but they didn't have the manpower or the resources to really do it. So it's hard to always assign some conspiracy there, when the reality probably is that they're just kind of inept.
Yeah. And what they did was all that time and effort, right? They left I was put on the domestic terrorist watch list 2 years after January 6th. This is another story in itself, Sean. It was after Southern Poverty and Law Center, an Antifa associate named Jeff Tischler. That little bitch is probably watching. He's from Chicago. He writes for the Southern Poverty and Law Center, and Democrats here got him to do a hit piece on me, right? And then all of a sudden, the Antifa guy started tagging me and Chicago FBI, Chicago field office, saying Terry Newsom tried to overthrow the government, right? And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, I'm a domestic terrorist. 2 years after January 6th, 2 weeks after the story came out, and within the weeks of them tagging them. And so you hear all the rumors about how the SPLC goes out and teaches law enforcement about who extremists are. We're extremists, right? Yeah. And I know the government's looking at taking away their nonprofit status. And then you got Antifa who's collaborating. You got sedition hunters. I mean, is it because we talked a little earlier? Yeah. Sean, was sedition hunters managed by a lot of Antifa associates as well?
I think to a degree, the different sedition hunters, because like I mentioned to you on, when it came to identifying certain individuals, I've had relatively cordial communications with them. It was kind of interesting. I think they realized at some point that, I was more factually interested in a lot of ways. So they're different as far as ideology goes. Some of them absolutely are Antifa. Particularly one of them I know is actually Republican, but kind of more of a, I don't know what you call them, like a McCain Republican, I guess might be the
Mhm.
accurate term. So I mean, they were
deep
people.
stater.
Yeah, I mean, they were people who were just motivated for whatever reason, you know, to go after all these people, and obviously the FBI was happy to take the help. You know, so it's interesting, but it was even frustrating for them when we talk about people that were identified and never charged.
Yeah.
Is they were equally as frustrated with that, equally as frustrated with the majority of January 6th defendants that, you know, the Republican Congress would never do anything to actually release all the video. We still don't have all the video.
You know what?
No.
Yeah, you know what burns my
You know, they're a joke.
is we got
Yeah.
these scumbag Trend Larva guys, right? The Venezuelans, and
Mhm.
we're sending them back, and we got these liberal pukes that are bitching that they didn't get their due process. Well, they didn't get their due process coming in here. They're here illegally. They're being sent out. None of us had our due. Well, not, I'm sorry, some of us did.
Well,
So I was put on a domestic terrorist watch list out of the blue because of the SPLC, and all of a sudden they're tagging the FBI 2 years later, right? And
Yeah.
all of a sudden I'm a domestic terrorist. I'm a quad S. My family was being harassed. I'd show up at the airport. They'd send 5 TSA agents and undercover marshals. Nobody told me why I was put on the domestic terrorist watch list. Matt Gaetz sent a demand letter, and I'm framing it now. Sean, it's pretty cool. It went to Garland, Ray, and Mayorkas in my name, demanding to know, why did you put him on a domestic terrorist watch list? Because I was a vocal school board parent, or because I was one of a million plus people that went to January 6th peacefully? I didn't do anything wrong, and they never got back to him. They never at. Why is this fucking cricket thing going off all the time?
I don't know. I was going to ask you why you have some of these.
No,
crickets
well,
there.
my old sound guy.
I mean, I'm the one sitting down in my basement. I should
yeah,
have.
I heard the cricket noise a minute ago. I thought that was coming from Sean down in the dungeon.
And now you do the Rush Limbaugh thing. That's good.
Yeah, get your papers in order next.
I think Antifa guys hacked the fucking.
They hacked your soundboard. Now it's chirping at you.
Oh my god, I can't believe this. So my sound guy, who's not here, used to do that when I talk too much. Maybe he's in here.
He's still messing with you.
Is it
Yeah.
crazy?
I'm hearing crickets. That's wild.
Yeah, or you've got a literal cricket in there, Terry. I mean, that could be too. I don't. I got you got a dog too, so my dog would eat the cricket.
Okay, I won't touch the table.
You're really in a foxhole, aren't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
He
in a
is way
bunker.
behind enemy lines.
So why don't we show some of the videos? We got some.
Yeah.
Some
Well-
really. It's never been. Son of a fucking bitch. What the hell's
Dude,
going on?
that's- All right, I'll start with video roulette, and we'll run the first one. You guys can give us the rundown on what this is.
Stand up for your country! That's right, get a picture, don't let them lie! Get a picture, show them how many people are here!
All right, this year I'm going to call my tech guy. You guys talk about it. I'm going to step off camera and call my tech gues. This is
Oh.
crazy. All right,
You
and
are getting cricketed.
I'm going to try to fix this. So Sean, I told you about that. Just share
Yeah.
your thoughts on who that guy is, who you think he is, or what he could be. He's definitely not just a Trump supporter, right? Do you agree? We agree on that?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe. No, I've over the years it's interesting if you play that video. I don't know if you can bring it up again, but there's an individual that Terry was asking me about earlier, and he's got a black face mask on. He's got a bullhorn, and he's saying things like, you know, make sure you take pictures, is what it appears like he's saying. I think it's this video.
No, it is what he's saying. Just so you know, and
Yeah.
So be in there.
Yeah. So it's when it pans back here,
Watch
you'll see him.
Look at.
Yeah, right there,
Yeah.
there. He's got like an American flag on his hat, you know, pretty covered up, you know, obviously trying to keep his identity somewhat suspect. Here's the thing, is that he very well could be Antifa, you know, without tracking his movements through the building. You know, from my perspective, this is the thing. I know Antifa were there. For instance, Talia Jane, who was very active in New York City, I've spoken to her about it. I spoke to her about it summer 2022. There was a speech going on with Andrew Giuliani, and they had, you know, the counter protests and everything going on.
Right.
And of course, the cops were telling me I couldn't cross the line, and I was like, well, I'm going to. And I went and had a conversation with her about her role there. I mean, she was there. She was taking pictures, documenting, sort of MAGA behaving badly, I guess you could say, because that's what they live for.
Yeah.
That's what they live for. They want to agitate, get people worked up, get them to do something stupid, dox them.
Yeah.
That's pretty typical. Now you could even say, and this is part of the problem. So like Talia, she had, she was working as press, right? Mm-hmm. And that was something that I had seen throughout the summer. I mean, I had people that were corresponding for me that were Antifa affiliated. That's why I was able to get the access to these groups that I was able to get.
Sure.
And I think that we saw those lines really blurred, which is even why somebody like me gets wrapped up and taken in, because obviously I had expressed sympathies for Proud Boys. I had expressed that the election, in my view, was stolen.
Yeah.
So there was plenty of things for people to say, well, you weren't pressed because you have an opinion. So I don't want to live in a world like that where we say, oh, you can't have an opinion. So to that point, that's where I go back to, we got to know what these people did, because it's not terribly relevant to me that Antifa was there. Of course they were. Another one, Patricia Iguino, who's a DC, or she's run for DC City Council. I don't know if she's ever made it. She was actually the lady that was screaming at Enrique Tarrio when we returned to the Capitol during CPAC and Proud Boys gave their press conference. She was there. She was up on the stairs. She was bullhorning. And they never picked her up. But the reason why was because they couldn't assign the motive, right? The motive to stop the certification to her. And they would have never gotten a conviction in a DC courtroom anyways. Whereas when you pick up a Trump supporter, the whole thing was stacked against them from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So it's tricky. It's tricky. And so when you say, well, could they be this? Sure, they could be that. But there were also people who were dressed exactly like him. Yeah. I'm trying to think of the individual's name offhand.
Well, so while you're thinking it, here's why I am absolutely confident. I don't know if the guy's Antifa, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if he's a Fed.
Yeah.
I do know he's not a Trump supporter. I do know that he was there to agitate. I do know he was facing everybody as they're approaching the Capitol at 1:30, about 1:31, give or take. They're walking that way. He's telling everybody to take pictures. Show the world, right? Because I know you didn't listen to that good, because I listen over and over again. All right, what happened with taking the pictures? And then how many people do you know that goes to Washington, D.C. alone with a fucking bullhorn, wraps their whole head and face up, covers their eyes, and you can't even see their hair?
Look, here's the problem. Here's the problem is that here's an individual particularly. There had been video pulled of this guy, and he had a American flag gaiter over his face. You couldn't see anything that was going on, and he was standing next to the fake gallows, right? There was an art project that, if anybody had ever tried to hang anybody off of it, it would have just broken. It would have looked really ridiculous. But the media took a picture, they framed it, and it was real scary. Well, you had this other individual there who was saying really inflammatory things right next to the gallows, and it was a great photo op for all these people. And everybody said, oh, this guy's a Fed, this guy's Antifa, and his name's David Dempsey, and he's absolutely a Trump supporter. So that sort of scenario has happened over and over and over again. And most of the people that your mainstream kind of casual MAGA media consumers have labeled as Antifa, most of those have been debunked. So,
Jason to fix the cricket.
Yeah. I mean, I just tend to stay skeptical until I'm shown proof. And so I got to push back that a little bit, because without the proof, I don't know. I mean, another one, Zachary Allen, he just went back to jail for burglary. And he was right there at the door when Ashley Babbitt was shot. He was the guy with his helmet, and he was breaking the window. And then, Ashley gave him a punch in the mouth. And then she tried to escape through the window, and she got shot. Well, Zach Allen, I observed him down in the crypt, and he was agitating with police. A lot of people have suspected that he's Antifa. People that were in jail with him have said that he confessed to being Antifa. I don't know. I know that his behavior that day sucked. I can say that. And I told him that to his face, because I saw him in DC at CPAC, and he was there, and I told him to his face. But even people, and I'm just going to say this without going too far, people like Jake Lang that everybody's holding up on a pedestal as being, whatever the fuck. he was one of the most aggressive individuals there that day. I mean, he
Without
was
a
going
doubt.
at cops repeatedly with a baseball bat.
I had him.
And
I had him on my show. I agree with you.
yeah,
I had him on my show from prison, right? So those of you guys know, I was in federal prison, and I wasn't there as a J6er, but I know damn well they didn't give us access. There wasn't phones and stuff then, right? So I know they hate the J6ers. They try to make them uncomfortable. They try to make it, difficult for them. How the hell was this guy able to do my interview? I was glad he did the interview. This was I don't know, a year and a half ago. And then
Yeah.
you hear about the phones and stuff. They didn't have that back then. But you know what? If you got a guy that's on doing interviews live or whatever over and over and over and over
Yeah.
again, you search their cell. You make sure they don't get a fucking cell phone. Something is up. Something's
well, yeah. And look, I mean, I think over time it's going to be up to people like myself who are probably never going to give up on trying to figure out what actually happened that day. I don't look to the government to do this. Look, even knowing what I know, okay, that there were, for instance, there were known members of Vorherrschaft Division, and I've been railing about this since 2022.
What is that?
So Vorherrschaft Division is a neo-Nazi group that's connected to Ukrainian neo-Nazi groups.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. And they were known, they were identified, but the problem, as my understanding is that these guys were also CIA assets. Okay. So
That
this
makes
is where
sense.
you get into the problem, whether you're talking about federal assets, whether you're talking about Ukrainian intelligence, Russian intelligence, Israeli intelligence, DHS, DOD. What I've known from the beginning was that there were multiple agencies, and so it's all spun around. And if you expect the government to just start releasing that stuff, you're out of your mind, because they're going to say that this is for national security reasons. They're going to cover it up the same way they've done Epstein files, the same way they've done JFK for so many years. They're going to wait till any documentation is destroyed. And the thing people don't understand about all of that is that the Director of National Intelligence is the only one with the authority to declassify a lot of the covert operations. So if our government was involved in covert operations that day, you're never going to have the paperwork. That's the point.
Yeah.
So it's tough. They're intended to be secret, so they
Now,
tend to stay secret.
Let's show
Real
a couple
quick,
videos
Is
for
that
people.
the same Ukrainian Nazis that they also picked up down in Florida around the same time as the second Trump attempted assassin, that they were nearby? Because I remember this story in the going around for like 2 or 3 days. It was like 3 or 4 guys. They taken
Blood
pictures
tribe.
around Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, is that who that was? Okay.
No, well, look, like I pointed out in the article that I referenced earlier, it's called Beowulf's American Lament, and I dove deep
remember
into
that
the
one.
idea of Psywar. Okay, and there is a concerted effort by our adversaries abroad to start a civil war in this country, and they will support whatever movement is likely to make that happen. They don't care. Look, we've seen it. There was Russian intelligence funding Timcast.
Really?
Yes.
I remember hearing something about
So this is the problem. You see it over and over again. There was a guy, Yeshtali was his last name, and he was out of Missouri, and Tucker Carlson had him on, and was kind of holding him up as this champion of free speech, and the government's coming after you. There were payments made to him by Russian assets to say certain things. And Tucker just ignored all of this. So I see it over and over and over again that there is a concerted effort to stir up trouble in the United States. And you look back to Yuri Bezmenov, the KGB spy who defected, and he told everybody about it. He particularly informed the Reagan administration of what was going on. And people still don't get it, that it has nothing to do with your ideology. When you're talking ideological subversion, what you're doing is you're trying to get people to believe that they are acting in their own best interests, when in reality, they're acting in the interests of division.
Yep.
And that's what we're seeing play out in this country. And right back to our buddy Jake Lang. I'll call him out for it right now. You see his behavior in recent weeks, where he's going out there and he's calling Austin Metcalf's dad a pussy. You know, he's just doing really horrendous things. Apparently, he's now saying that he was attacked by 4 black men because he signed, you know, Ye's Heil Hitler album. I'm waiting for that video to surface.
Well, I'm sure it's with the
Right.
2 brothers that attacked what's his name in Chicago. You know.
Yeah.
I got
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Look, if I'm wrong, but like say, I mean, I'm not a rich man, but my money's that Jussie Smollett has some competition right now.
Yeah.
So, Mike, let's show a couple videos because because I know some people didn't see a lot. So just randomly pick a few that you want to show.
All right, we'll go to the next one in the stack, and then I do have that Ashley Babbitt one on the side.
I want the people to especially see, not right, you know, pick a couple other ones, but that to me is the most moving one to see. All this very vet laying on the ground, piece of shit that shot her.
Yeah. Well, this next one's short, so we'll run a couple of these.
They're shooting at
That was very similar to that one video that went viral, except we weren't quite as close. If you guys remember Ray Epps.
Yeah, I mean, I could see up at the front. You had Ray Epps. You know, that was right where Ryan Samsel ended up. You know, the fence got shoved over into Carolyn Edwards, the cop, and
the first video. If you heard me, it was me coughing. You know, so that was actually later. You know, and this was the first, very beginning, the Ray Epps one. But you know, I'm standing there, and they're shooting, and you hear me coughing, right? I'm not even close, and so that's part of why some of these people got angered, right? I mean, they're just shooting. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I'm just standing there filming, and I'm coughing, and I wasn't even right next to wherever that gas grenade, whatever, went off, and is making me cough, like just starting to cough. And so a little explanation on the Ray Epps one is, you know, Rob and I, we walked. You know, we have a video. I think you have a still of me walking to the Capitol with the flag, right? So we were one of the early ones. We walked ahead of time. That's me and Rob at the monument before we left. But there's another one with the flag over me as I'm walking with the Capitol in the foreground. And so we left earlier with some. Oh, there we go. And this is the Sedition Hunters. This is what Joseph Marino, he's a Republican, that he's posting this, say that I was a confidential informant, that this is justification. So me and Rob walked early. We wanted to make sure people weren't going to get beat up. We walked with some of the Chicago Proud Boys and a bunch of other guys. And as we walked up to the Capitol, we only ran into I think like the Antifa guys, and they had these little antennas and stuff. They had these PVC things with antennas in them, and their backpack.
Yeah.
And then as we got by the food trucks, I don't know if you were on the west side. Remember the food truck one?
Yeah.
Right. So I was so exhausted that we had to sit down by the food trucks, and that's where all the other Proud Boys congregated. You probably saw something in the news. And me, we were sitting up on the steps. I'm like, I couldn't. I had a knee replacement that year. I had immunotherapy the day. I was exhausted. So we sat up there for a while, and then they started watching. Started walking towards the west side of the Capitol. So we're like walking behind them, right? And they're yelling, F Antifa. Or what am I going to? Yeah. They said, fuck Antifa. What am I trying to control my swearing? We're walking behind them, and as they walk to the west side, Rob and I.
Antifa got Terry. He's frozen.
Yeah. Remember me talking about that line of thunderstorms?
Yeah, or the crickets finally got him. Maybe he does have actual crickets.
You need to make sure and screenshot that. It's a good pose.
Yeah. Let me grab this for him real quick.
Yeah. I mean it's really interesting to see moments from so many different angles. And then of course, it's funny seeing the whole Sedition Hunters yellow outline stuff. It's like the picture he posted a story from the Albuquerque newspaper about me that was a bunch of bunk at the time, and it's like the whole thing where it's like they had crayon and they're circling my face, like it wasn't public everywhere. It was pretty funny. So
yeah,
you see it over and over again, but it's like you watch the videos and you see little details every time you watch something new. That's for sure. So I don't know. Maybe we'll figure it out.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things that has kind of been a disappointment, that we haven't seen a real push since Trump's inauguration to get the remaining video released, and a real J6 panel to figure out what really went on behind the scenes. The thing I always bring up is I think somebody gave an order to open the magnetic doors. Otherwise, nobody would have got in. They could have kept the building secure. So somebody on the inside told them to open those doors. Just like I think that somebody was given an order to fire the tear gas and the rubber bullets on the one side that was peaceful, where everybody was just standing there. But they wanted to start a conflict there. They wanted to ignite the situation to more than it was.
Well, I think that there was a lot of bad decisions made, particularly with the way that they were firing the tear gas. Anybody who's done any deep analysis on that knows that it was improper use. Yes. And obviously at some point the order was given to disperse the crowd, although nobody could really hear the order, which was another problem. Anytime you're dealing with a riot, you need everybody to hear that it's time to disperse or you'll be subject to arrest. I never heard anything like that. I'm sure a lot of people didn't, although apparently they did play a little something. So a lot of people had no clue. They just started having, flashbang grenades tossed in at them, and a lot of people reacted negatively to that for a lot of different reasons. I think that a lot of Trump supporters aren't used to engaging with police that way. So I think that was part of the problem in and of itself. And then, people were angry. They were there. They thought the election had been stolen. They wanted to protest. And even myself, because by the time I got to the Capitol, I had no idea that the grounds were initially restricted, because the crowd had pushed past that point. So there was nothing to really tell you. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I didn't think that there'd be trouble for going into the building, because I was pretty sure there would be, but I did it anyways. I was there to do a job, and I did the job. But you saw a lot of agitation, and I don't know that all of that is necessarily conspiracy. You mentioned the magnetic locks on the doors. I've had a lot of different thoughts about that. The reality is what we know is that a window was broken by a guy who's never been identified. They call him Red on Red Glasses. You can go find his info. That window was broken. Then Dom Pizzola, a Proud Boy, I love Dom. But, he's over there and he's like, well, I've got this police shield and let me sweep this glass out of the way, which is funny. His attorney in the Proud Boys trial actually, trying to make everybody be a little more lighthearted about it, said that Dom was actually assisting in that glass needed to be cleaned up anyways before they could repair the window. That was one of the arguments that were made in the trial. But Dom gets in through the window and he kind of looks like, oh, what's going on? And then this is, I pointed out about the two guys that are, presumed to be in Israel, Asher and Gil Daniels. They entered the building right after that, and then they ran around to the Senate fire doors and they kicked them open from the inside. So I went in that door. I was there at the very first doors that were opened from the inside. It was them. And all of those doors have a delay on them, which is typical for a fire alarm door, right? If there's a fire, you still have to be able to get out of the building. And so that's what you see at all the doors. There was another, it was a George Tinney that opened up the memorial doors over on the east side of the building. That happened pretty shortly afterwards. Same deal where you've seen the video circulate where they're like, oh, he's looking up and giving a signal to somebody. Well, the reality is there's a sign right there that says, wait 3 seconds and then push it again and it'll open, which is what happened. And then there was another set of doors on the west side as well that were opened, not very far away from where I was at the time. And it was actually the police that opened those doors because they were trying to let people that had gone in out, and it kind of backfired on them. And that's where you see the famous video where the cops just kind of standing to the side, almost defeated. And he says, I don't agree with it, but I respect it.
Yeah. Okay.
And people are walking through. So that's where that happened. So, I mean, it's hard for people who haven't done deep analysis of this stuff to just see the bigger picture. I don't know about the magnetic doors. I've heard that, but when I look at it, I go, and understanding fire doors. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of those videos, and like we've played them forever ago on Derek and I show on the Insurrection,
sure. And there's one where because I think it was 2 separate videos that we have, or 2 separate doors on video. There's multiple angles, I think, on the main one that we talked about, and I may be conflating the two. But one of them, there's somebody standing downstairs, and then there's somebody on an upper level yelling down to them, but there's no audio. And then they're clearly telling him to open the doors. He tries the first time, they're still not up. Terry might be back here. And then he goes back, tries again, and I guess then the guy upstairs released the magnetic locks, and they're able to finally open the doors.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what I'm talking about. I can't remember the specific time when George Tinney opened those doors, but in that video, I mean, people have kind of clowned on it a lot. There's a sign right next to the door that says you got to wait 3 seconds. So, he's yelling up and saying, "Well, I can't open the door," and they're like, "Try it again." That's the Occam's razor answer to that question. And the reality is, I've got experience in construction. Obviously, that's just how fire doors work.
Sure.
Again, I think this is the problem: is that Americans are very desperate for conspiracies because it's easier to accept a conspiracy than it is just stupidity.
True.
Damn, I'm back.
I
didn't even know we had a big storm until the power went out. I could hear it outside. It's yellow outside.
What did I say?
Well, we thought it was either the storm or the crickets got you. It was one or the other.
So thank you for keeping going, guys. Did you guys show the? Because I got your text. Did you show the Ashley Babbitt video?
No, I just I wanted to know if you wanted us to run it in case you couldn't join back when I saw your text that your cable was out.
A lot of people didn't see this, even though they know about it. So this is very important. But for those of you watching, look what happened to this woman. She's a military vet. She was shot in the face. It hit her, actually her neck, but the guy tried to shoot her in the face. She did not have a weapon. She did not pose deadly harm. My police officer buddy, Rob Waller, I got 2 retired federal agent buddies from the ATF. That guy had no justifiable reason to shoot that woman. No matter what they say, no matter what the left says, no matter what they say about the trespassing, there was no justification. There was no weapon. There was no threat. And if this was a black woman, oh my God, and a white cop, there would have been riots. So this. This woman was a military vet. Did she trespass? Yeah, but big effing deal, right?
Yeah, well, especially when you consider this is following the Summer of Love. All right, let's roll it.
Where's she hit? No. Hey, help her. Help me, come on. Where you guys? Come on. Come on. No. She needs help. She needs fucking help. Get back! She's gone, man. You can't save her. You're here. You gotta get EMS here. Get back! Oh, fuck! All right. Those 2 women. You gotta get back. Back up, guys. Back up. Hey, back up. I gotta do this now. You got it?
Wow. It's that bothers me seeing that. I found that again just coming up with these. We're getting ready for the show, and again, I think what is she like 115 pounds, 5'4"?
She's not a big woman. Had a big heart. Over the years, I got to know her mother. Pretty well.
Yeah, Mickey.
I think this is kind of the ugly reality. I mean, it's like you mentioned. There was no reason for him to shoot and kill her the way he did, Michael Byrd. We're talking about an officer who has a history of negligence, and there was an incident years before where he had left his gun in the bathroom. Right. He reacted very, very badly. I think that part of him thought in his mind, well, I'm going to be the hero and save the day. You had a lot of cops that just behaved really badly that day, and I think that points to the overall landscape of January 6th. My buddy Steve Baker, who works for the Blaze, fellow J6 journalist who enjoyed the charges as well. I mean, I'll misquote him, but he said that there were good people doing good things, good people doing bad things, bad people doing good things, bad people. And I'm really butchering his quote. But the point being is that it was a mix. I've always just said it was bizarre. There were cops there that were really reasonable, that were trying to de-escalate. There were cops there that were assholes.
Yeah.
There were MAGA supporters there that were chill. There were MAGA supporters there that were assholes. It's just not a clear picture, and this is part of the problem with the way they went after everybody. And then even with that death, I don't want to discount this, because this is the reality, is that with the pardons, and I don't want to forget the guys who were convicted of seditious conspiracy, that have not gotten their pardons, military veterans, Stuart Rhodes, Zach Reel, Dom Pizzola, these guys, that they deserve better. They've never been able to prove any insurrection. It's funny, one of the reasons why I called my website 1776returns.com was me sort of flipping my bird at the Department of Justice, because there was a document that was actually put together. Oh, what the hell was his name? I've got names skipping my mind tonight. Guy out of Florida, Samuel Armez, who was being groomed by, some people in the intelligence agencies, real high level, and he had put together
just like me.
Yeah, I mean, he'd put together an analysis document that was called the 1776 Returns Plan. Okay, and it wasn't even accurate to it. But then one of Enrique's girlfriends or whatever, dumped it into a Proud Boys chat, and the government used that initially to charge them with seditious conspiracy. But then, of course, that fell apart. And so then they were left with this dumb idea of the tools theory, which is that this seditious conspiracy just happened spontaneously through psychic messages to each other, and then everybody knew that now was the time to overthrow the government. It was really bizarre, and that's what they used. And it's like, so to all that point, and then you have Ashley, who's dead. She's never coming back. Her mother fought for years at Freedom Corner, to try to raise some sort of public awareness for it. And God bless her, because there were a lot of people, I had already finished my sentence by the time the pardon came around, so it was pretty much inconsequential to me. But there were people that were in prison that are now free because of that. And it's sad that she fought so hard, but, her daughter's never coming home.
Yeah, could you, because, I had somebody ask, my buddy Shane asked about, so, for instance, Ashley, I think I saw in the news, didn't they get some sort of settlement? Another question, and this is only your opinion, I don't, that officer who shot her in the face.
Bird.
Is that piece of shit going to have any consequence? Oh, somebody also said, I keep swearing here, I'm sorry. Is that guy going to have any consequences for what he's done to this woman?
Yeah, I don't know what the exact terms of the settlement are. I think everybody kind of knew that would be coming. With the Trump administration, was that lawsuit would get settled, and rightfully so.
Upset about it.
Yeah, I mean, as far as any consequences for Byrd, I doubt it.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
doubt it.
if there was somebody in Congress that had some balls and they would actually launch a real investigation into this and review the documents that were destroyed with the sham J6 committee, then maybe we'd see some action. But that's the problem, is there is nobody right now with any courage up there. I mean, I think the same reason that Ed Martin wasn't allowed to be a DC district attorney is they don't want somebody that's really going to look into this stuff and press charges against all the bad actors behind the scenes and expose all the other incompetence and the political persecution that went on. So they certainly don't want Byrd drug out. They've tried to fluff him up, pretend he's a hero, but also getting a conviction from a DC jury is going to be borderline impossible anyway, since, you know, these people in DC, it isn't just that they're, you know, 96% Democrats or whatever the vote total was from the last election, you know, somewhere close to that. Maybe it was 92%. It's that they're activists. The same problem we have with all these employees at different agencies in DC is they're so corrupt they can't look past their political bias and just do a job, whether that's being a honest member of a jury or you know, somebody working in the Library of Congress.
Yeah. So no, I want to mention another thing, and I'm sure that Sean, you know about this, the Bofang radio. Remember the Bofang radio? Have you heard about the Bofang?
Maybe.
We all had Bofang. Well, we Patriots, Proud Boys.
I've got a bunch of them.
Bofang radio. It's a matter of fact, it's sitting over there. My dad brought it back after the last 4 years. So I got there so late we didn't program them. So you know how they're talking about the way everybody was dressed up and stuff, and you remember what happened in November, December? We talked about BLM.
Yeah.
People that say, "Oh, they had nothing to do with it." Oh, they, you know what? So think about it, people. This is just a little common sense. Every time there was an incident, there was an event, there was a rally, it was flooded with BLM or Antifa, right? I mean, it was flooded. Well, isn't it really odd that they were nowhere to be found, supposedly, on January 6th?
Yeah, you know, there's a couple of ways to interpret that. I know that a lot of the Antifa groups in DC, they were putting out, you know, the narrative, I guess you could call it, whether it's true or not. They were putting out information that was saying that they were just going to stay out of it. They were going to stay away from it. Which to me, you know, reinforces the idea that they were there. You know, again, here's part of my problem, and we kind of talked about this, was that when I initially dealt with that, there was a guy named Jason Funes who was a Trump staffer in the Interior Department, and he was involved in various capacities setting up security for the Trump team at the time. And you know, he contacted me shortly after January 6th, and he started feeding me information. Okay, and that information was coming from John Sullivan's brother. And
everybody with John.
So John Sullivan, he was kind of rejected by every group he tried to get in with. Out in Utah, he had tried to form, you know, some sort of alliance with Black Lives Matter. They never really accepted him. But he had a group called Insurgents USA. He was there. He filmed Ashley Babbitt being shot. He ended up selling his footage, which isn't anomalous. I just want to point that out for a journalist to sell footage.
Right.
Which, again, you can debate, you know, journalism. And he was, and if I got charged for saying, "Brother, stand with us," to a Capitol police officer at some point, then certainly he should have been charged, and he was, and he got sent to prison for it. But there was a narrative that Funes was very pushy with me about. This is kind of interesting, where he was demanding that I kind of move forward. He had sent me a lot of information about John Sullivan's parents. He said that this information had been forwarded to Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani ran with it and was basically saying Antifa did it. There was a well-known troll who released a video who said that he was there, and people were circulating that as though it was true. So I saw this kind of counter narrative taking hold and saying it was Antifa. Really didn't line up with what I had seen. I didn't, you know, and again, not debating Antifa was there, but when you're looking at who was behaving and what was doing, I didn't see anything to say, yes, Antifa did it. Did they have a role? Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So
I just, you know, to make this point, that I think that one of the most damaging things about that was when that narrative took hold initially in 2021, when people were getting arrested like me, we could not get any support from the conservative right. Everybody was kind of walking away from it.
So pissed me off. Yeah. So my thoughts on, they were absolutely there. Their silence was deafening. They always want, especially January 6th with the election and everything, they wanted to be disrupted. That's in their DNA, right? We came across a couple as we were on the way there. Me and Rob Waller, my cop buddy, but who, by the way, wanted me to go. I shouldn't have gone. My wife was mad. Like I said, at January 5th, noon, I was at University of Chicago on an IV for stage 3 melanoma. I should never went. He's like, I'll drive you, relax. We got there about 12:30. We checked into the hotel, and then we tried to park in an outside parking garage because the garage was full. And as we're looking, there was like a couple spots. It was like really tight. And I got out. I was going to pay with my credit card, and then this car pulled up, and there was 6 guys in this little car. So even though I'm older, you know, Rob he still works out. Fuck, I could take on 3 Antifas myself and just fart on them and knock them over because they're so little. And they're yelling at us saying they're going to break the windows out of the car. And they're like, any license plates, we're going to come back, or Antifa, we're going to break your windows out. And I'm in the middle of the parking lot where the credit card thing was. And I start walking towards them. And Rob gets out of his car, and then they take off. You know what I mean? They take off. So that was the night before, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my own I know they were there. And another thing is that, so Rob's like, oh, I don't want to leave my car here, right? So we went somewhere further away and parked his car in another outside lot. And then when we left on January 7th at the Marriott, there was cars that were being, picking up their baggage and stuff with their windows all smashed out. So, I mean, they were there. They were absolutely there. There was no way they could control themselves because they're scumbags that they couldn't be mixed in this thing, right? They don't let that stuff go by. That's a gift for them, right? And they were smart enough, and I give them credit. Now, with that said, I'm not blaming Antifa. To your point, there was people that really screwed up, right? I was with a police officer. You saw that video, Blue Lives Matter. That was my friend's flag, right? And I was with a police officer, and I saw people fighting with police, and they deserve to get in trouble. And it's funny is that my cop buddy and my 2 federal agent ATF buddies, and when we're in the backyard drinking and stuff, they're like, it's kind of funny in Chicago, the Cook County Sheriff guy's like, we're lucky if those bastards even get arrested, right, for beating us up. And these guys, some of these guys sat without even if they're guilty and they should have been punished. Nobody should have been sat in jail, even for the ones that fought with a police officer for more than a year.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because that doesn't happen here in Chicago. That doesn't happen anywhere in the United States. Yes, they should have been punished, but they shouldn't have sat in prison without getting a trial, sitting there for years, sitting there in solitary. That is cruel, unusual punishment. So not that they should have got punished, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's about the punishment meeting the crime. Like, had you guys gotten your trespassing tickets and whatever, that'd be acceptable. But 4 years basically in and out of solitary confinement's ridiculous.
Well, and this kind of points to the problem with media narrative. I did an analysis of the bail for people that were held in the quote unquote DC Gulag, the DC CTF there in correctional treatment facility in DC. And honestly, under federal guidelines, most of the people that were held pre-trial, they had justification to do so under the norms. So it wasn't anything particularly anomalous there in that people who had had prior felonies and things like that, like they're going to get held pre-trial. And so I understand what you're saying, but this goes back to our buddy Jake Lang. And this narrative took hold that everyone was being held without trial, and it was particularly him. He kept saying, I haven't been given trial, I haven't been given trial. Well, the reason he never had his trial was because he delayed it repeatedly.
I agree with that without even knowing the details. I'm like, why is this sitting in there for 4 years?
So, but again, that's how that takes hold in everybody's mind. But when you do analysis of the facts, it's not really true. And that's not to say that there weren't egregious things that happened. There were plenty of them. You mentioned the idea of people that were violent with the police. I've said this since day one, is that if they would have actually focused on the people who engaged in violence and destructive behavior that day, I don't think anybody in America would have had a problem with it.
Yeah. But
the problem was they went after every single person who just walked through the building. They went after journalists. They went after everybody. And so at some point, it's such a messed up thing that even though I didn't agree with the idea of a blanket pardon when that's essentially what Trump did, I go, fine, whatever. If that's how we fix it and we move on, great. Of course, he still needs to pardon some people. But
yeah, so I still think even those that, and I agree with you, and there's different based on your background and stuff, right? That you could be treated differently, right?
Sure.
Like that guy Severino who's like chasing me around stuff. Thank God 35 years ago I would have won and broke his legs by now. But sorry, I digress there. So you get treated even for something like a small battery or assault, right? And they do treat them
Mhm.
differently, but they should have had the opportunity to get bail regardless. You know what I mean? They should have
Well,
had.
they did. They
know,
did.
Many of
They
them
did. They did. There was multiple hearings for all of them, Terry. I mean, that's the idea that there weren't bail and bond hearings for these guys. That's just a myth. That's just a myth. It took hold because, frankly, that served political purposes. This is the problem, and I will always rail against it with media in America, is that everybody says they want factual information, right? They say that we don't want biased news. Why don't reporters just tell us the facts? The reality is that doesn't make money. What makes money is confirming people's biases.
Well, you know what? Then that falls on the media on the right for not letting us know that, right? The left,
It absolutely does.
they're scumbags, right? So
Yeah.
they don't want to, right?
Yeah.
But the media on the right should at least let us know that, because lots of people were angry because of that, because we don't know, right? And they should.
I've fought that machine for years, Terry, where I was always going against the grain. And that's not me saying that everybody that there was bad, but it's just I kept seeing this problem where I would just see lies out of the right-wing conservative media, and then they propagate because nobody fact checks it. And the reason nobody fact checks it, this is the other problem I see, is that right-wing alternative media, you don't really have newsrooms.
Yeah, you don't have the resources.
Yeah, you don't have the resources to fact check. People are going live every day, and they're just kind of rolling with whatever they saw on Twitter. And it just propagates falsehoods.
Yeah.
And it's a bad situation, but that's what it is.
So, Mike, why don't you show us a couple more videos? Because I know people.
Well, we're actually going to have to wrap it up because we're already well over, and we got another show starting in a few minutes. Unfortunately, that's going to be on this one.
Okay, so just so you guys know, next week we're going to have Jim Bob, Baby Thor. Jim Bob from Chicago. He was in that video, in that image with me on. We were the ones, we were walking. I was with Jim Bob as we walked to the Capitol. He had a 22-year-old wife with twins, and
Wow.
He had 4 years in jail. Never even had a speeding ticket. Good kid, doesn't even get drunk. He had a flagpole. His flagpole hit an officer on the shoulder. Not like it dipped down, right? And He doesn't even have the officer. They didn't know who the officer was, and the kid got 4 years in prison. They surrounded his house, his wife, his kids, a 2-year-old baby. So Jim's going to be back on the show, and that's somebody that Severino tried to act like I set up. So he's going to be on the show for the second time. And then we're going to have who I really love, and you probably know this guy, Lego Man, Robert Morris. I love that guy.
Yeah,
I really.
Guy.
And he's going to be on the show next Tuesday. And these guys, I want to, the update I want from them is to share how this thing affected their lives. These are two good people. Right? They didn't fight with police officers. They didn't hurt anybody. And they're very good. And Lego Man was a school teacher.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being on the show. I appreciate it. We got a little bit of late start, but that's typical for Behind the News Lines. Sorry.
No, thanks for having me.
I'd love to have you on again.
It's been a pleasure.
You got that brain of yours. You can remember all this shit, so it's a great asset too.
Sure.
What went on?
Well, yeah, good to see you again, Sean. Yeah, we'll have to get something organized. Yeah, normally we could keep going, but we've got a second syndicate coming on in 10 minutes, and they're on this same set of this same Restream account. We have 3 different ones that we rotate on X American News, but they're on this one. So,
One last word. Is there anything coming up with January 6th, folks, that people, any events or get-togethers or, support events or anything that you know of?
Well, I know there's a few things going on. A lot of those are kept in family. They do a bit of a reunion every year here in Missouri. There's different stuff popping up everywhere. I think if people need to remember one thing, it's that, there's still people out there who need pardons. They can go check out the article that I wrote. It's very long-winded. But it's a very gonzo, unfiltered take on how everything went down at CPAC. Particularly my reason for never shutting up, frankly, was Joe Biggs. And I've said that since the very beginning. I said he certainly never deserved what he got and the way he's been slandered, and he's not getting his benefits as a veteran, as a 2-time Purple Heart.
Jesus. Yeah.
You know, it's egregious. So that's all I would ask people to remember, is that it isn't as simple as, oh, everybody's gotten pardoned. You know, their justice still really hasn't been served, and so we're going to keep fighting.
Hey, I'm showing my goodwill. Okay, side. This is from the Goodwill, so it's not racist. It's from the Goodwill. I got this at the Goodwill. Thank you. All right, Mike, he's getting all nervous. We got to get off, clear up his.
Yeah, they're calling me right now. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to continue grow so we can bring